Hello and good day. Today we shall talk on the systematic ways of data collection. So this topic is part of your subject, which is Inquiries, Investigation, and Immersion, also called as your III. And in this topic, we shall have two focuses for today, or foci for today. These are research design and sampling methods. So first, let's try to look into the outline of this discussion. Number one, we shall look into the importance of the research methodology. And under research methodology, we shall have two topics which will be highlighted for today. The first one is your research design and also sampling methods. So to start, let's have a starter. Let's try to look at this picture and analyze the situation. So what do you think happened in this picture? Obviously, there is someone or there's a person who cooked their rice and it didn't turn out the way it's supposed to be. So this is a funny picture depicting how a person could wrongfully cook their rice and it ended in a disaster. So why do you think this failure happened? So maybe this person didn't follow the instructions properly and we have a disaster. So that's what we're preventing when making a research. We're preventing a disastrous result. That's why we need to follow series of steps properly. We need to plan and then execute this methodology so that we can have a better way of collecting our data. So let's start our discussion with what's methodology and its importance. So in methodology, we shall discuss or in the methodology section, we discuss what we will do in the data collection process, as well as how we will do our data collection process. When we say data collection process, we have to bear these questions in mind. First, what data will we get in our research paper? Will we get quantitative data? Will we get qualitative data? Or will we get both kinds of data, or your mixed methodology? Next, from whom will you get your data? Who will be the respondents of your study? And third, how will you obtain your data? What design will you use? What research instruments will you use to collect your data? And finally, what statistical analysis will you use so that you can interpret your data and make your discussion or the discussion of your results? So the methodology section, otherwise known as chapter 3, consists of 5 parts. So the first one is your research design, in which you're going to state the design of your study. Number 2, population and sample, in which you're going to discuss who are the respondents of your study and how you selected them. Number 3, research instrument, in which you're going to discuss the instrument that will be used in your study. Number 4, and the most important of all, this is your data gathering procedure. In this section, you're going to state the steps, just like a recipe, the steps that you undertook while gathering your data. Number 5, what statistical analysis did you use so that you are able to come up with that result? So as highlighted during the introduction of this lesson, we shall focus on 2 topics for today. The first one is your research design, and the second one will be your population and sample. Now, let's go to the first one, which is your research design. The research design is simply the plan on how you approach your study. This is your strategy on how you're going to collect your data so that you're able to answer your research problem. Next, So these are some tips on how to write your research design, which is the first part of your methodology or chapter 3. This is according to Azevedo 2011. So number 1, we have to introduce the overall methodological approach for investigating your research problem. When we say the approach, we mean, is it a quantitative study? Are you going to use a qualitative approach, or are you going to use a mixed methodology? Aside from the overall methodological approach, you have to specify what design you will use. During the first semester, we learned about the 4 kinds of research design. The first is your descriptive design, which is used when you're trying to describe the population. Number 2, the comparative design, in which you're going to compare the results of two or more target groups. Say, for example, you're trying to discuss the learning habits between male and female students. That an appropriate research design will be your comparative design. Third is your correlational design. In a correlational design, you're trying to investigate if variable X affects variable Y or variable Y affects variable X. Say, for example, you're trying to investigate if the higher amount of allowance gives you or affects your grades. So, titignan natin kung mas mataas ba yung allowance, ibig sabihin ba nun, mas mataas yung grades? Or is it the other way around? Habang tumataas yung allowance, bumababa yung grades. Habang bumababa yung allowance, mas tumataas yung grades. So if you're trying to look into the relationships of 2 or more variables, we are using a correlational design. Finally, if you're trying to test an instrument, if you're trying to test a product or coming up with an invention, an experimental design is an appropriate design that will be used in your research paper. Next, number 2, we indicate how the approach fits the overall research design. In this part, you're going to discuss your reasons why you chose those research designs. Number 3, describe the specific methods of data collection. What instruments were used? What statistical analysis were used? And what will you do with your data? So that's how we try to write our research design. And to give you a discussion on an example on how research design is written, this is an example that I can give you from last year's research paper. This is the research design of one group. Their study is on the learning strategies of senior high school students. So let's try to read. This paper used quantitative approach in investigating the common learning strategies of senior high school students. Specifically, the study used a descriptive comparative design. Descriptive design was used because the study investigated the common learning strategies of the students, while comparative design was used in finding the significant difference between the learning strategies of the respondents who have academic achievements and those that do not have academic achievements. The quantitative data were gathered using a survey questionnaire, and the results were analyzed using statistical analysis. The results were used to make the output of the study, which is an informative poster. So the tips from Azevedo and his colleagues were incorporated in this example. Let's try to evaluate. Is the overall methodological approach stated in this example? Yes, we can see that in the first sentence. What kind of approach was used? Quantitative approach. What specific designs were used? We can see that in the second sentence. A descriptive comparative design was used in the study. What could be the reasons why descriptive design was used? We can see that in the third sentence. It is because the study investigated the common learning strategies of the students. Another, why is comparative design used? It is because it was used in finding the significant difference between the learning strategies of two kinds of respondents. The first respondent, those who have academic achievements, and the second respondents, those that do not have academic achievements. So you can see here, may mga rason kung bakit descriptive design at comparative design ang ginamit. Next, are we able to, or were there any mentions of an instrument that was used in the study? Yes, we can see that in the fourth sentence, a survey questionnaire was used. And what will the data, or how will the data be processed? It will be processed using statistical analysis. Klaro yun. And are there other information about the design of the study? We can see that in the last part, an informative poster will be used as, or will be produced as an output of the study. So ulitin lang natin, in your research design, you have to have the 5 elements: overall methodological approach, like this one; specific designs, like this one; the reasons on why you chose those designs, like in this example; your instrument; and other information regarding your data collection process. What will be your outcome? How will you analyze it? So those are the 5 elements that should appear in your research design so that your reader will be able to understand better your methodology. Claro? Next, let's proceed to the second and last part. Ang bilis. Last part ng ating discussion, which is the population and sample. It is very impractical to get now the responses of all students of Ujawan National High School, especially now that we are in a pandemic and stuck in our home. So what we do is to get a sample. Ang tawag natin dyan, sampling. So a sample is a group of people who will represent your population. Ang tanong, paano natin kukunin yung sample natin? Yung group ng people na rumerepresenta ng ating population. There are 2 ways. One is probability sampling, and the other one is non-probability sampling. When we say probability sampling, let's go over this one by one. When we say probability sampling, all individuals have equal chances of being chosen as respondents of the study. Walang ine-exclude, lahat may chance na mapipili. Hindi mo pipiliin lahat. May chance silang mapipili. So one advantage of this is that the data now, after gathering the responses, the data is very representative of the population. In other words, the data will tell us, or has a reliable way of telling the responses of our respondents. It's better to generalize your result when you use probability sampling. However, when we use probability sampling, it is more time-consuming and it is relatively expensive. Let's try to go over the kinds of probability sampling. May mga kinds pa yan. Let's go with the simplest form of probability sampling. This is the simple random sampling. In the simple random sampling, we generate, or we assign numbers to each individual. We generate numbers, and then we select those individuals according to the random number that was generated. So this is an example. Example lang natin, let's say ito yung population ng mga senior high school students ng isang school. We have 24 at ang target natin ay 8 na respondents. So paano natin mapipili yon? We have to give them equal chances of being selected. So lahat sila may chance ang mapipili. And then next step, you have to assign them a specific number. So for example, itong si Gary, na hindi ko naman kilala will be given a number which is 1. Si Brian will be given 2. Si Crisaline will be given 3 until you have the flow 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on and so forth. And then after that, you have now to generate a random number. Pag sinabing random number, we use an alternate software. Hindi dapat manggagaling sa'yo kasi baka bias yon. So we have a software that can be used. Aside from this, merong traditional way kung paano maka-generate ng random number. Pwede kang gumamit ng fishbowl method. Mag-cut ka lang ng pieces of paper, then you have to write the numbers, tapos parang bunot-bunot. So in that way, walang bias, random yung mapipili. Aside from this, you can download a random number generator app from Google Play Store. So after downloading that, you just enter the number of population, let's say 24, hanggang number 24 ang kanyang i-generate. And then yun lang, i-click mo lang yun, tapos papakita na yung random number na ma-generate ng application na yon. Let's say ito yung mga random number na na-generate niya. So si number 2 ang na-generate niya. So sino si number 2? So si Brian ang magiging respondent natin. Next, random number 11. So sino si 11? Si Jake. Next, 24. Sino yung 24? Si Rox. So until masatisfy natin yung number of respondents na kailangan ng study natin. That's simple random sampling. Simple because, number 1, you assign them numbers. Number 2, generate the random number. Ganun lang kasimple. Next kind of probability sampling method is your systematic random sampling. Ang keyword lang natin dito ay interval. So magse-select tayo ng interval which is known as your K. So paano yan? This is one example. So going back to our population of senior high school students, let's say silang mga ito, 24 sila, we have to generate an interval. The interval will be the basis of selecting our respondents. Papaano? There is a simple, very simple formula for that. So K is equal to the total number of population divided by your target number of respondents. Say for example, you have 24. 24 sila dito. So the total number of population is 24, tapos yung divided by your target number of respondents. Ang target number natin, let's say 8. So 24 divided by 8 is 3. 3 now will be your interval, your basis of selecting that respondent. Every third person tayo. So let's see kung sino yung mga third person na yon. 1, 2, 3, si Crisaline. Next, proceed. 1, 2, 3, si Judith. Respondent number 6. 1, 2, 3, si Denver. 1, 2, 3, si Jemmy. 1, 2, 3, si Alvin, until you satisfy your target number of respondents. A bit complicated than simple random sampling, but at least there is an equal chance of being selected. Now, the most complicated of the three, this is the stratified random sampling. When we say stratified random sampling, there are two major steps. The first major step is separating your population into groups. Igugrupo natin sila. And these groups are called strata. Again, these groups are called strata. So what will be your basis when separating your population? A good tip if you are separating the population of students, again, of students, is to separate them by section. Kasi available na sila. they are already grouped at mas madali lang mag-float ng questionnaire kung by classroom/by section nyo sila bibisitahin. So that's your first major step. Separate your population into groups. Second, after nyo nang ma-separate, you have to choose between a simple random sampling or systematic random sampling. So, pipili kayo kung simple random or systematic random ang gagawin nyo. So, this is one illustration that best illustrates what stratified sampling is. So, ito yung population ng students. Igugrupo natin sila by section. And then, after na-grupo natin sila by section, you have to choose, isa lang, between random sampling or systematic random sampling. So after that, let's say for example, random sampling ang ginawa natin. After nating ma-random sampling yung group A or section A, ito na yung respondents natin. After natin ma-random sampling yung section B, ito na yung respondents natin. After natin ma-random sampling yung last section, that is or those are your respondents already. Okay, to present you in a table, let's say ganito. Yung senior high school students, sila yung respondents natin. You are going to do stratified random sampling. Now, you're going to divide the group kasi nga stratified random sampling, you have to divide the group into strata or into sections. We have section A, section B, section C. Tapos, after that, after nyo nang ma-divide, you have to choose between random sampling or systematic random sampling. One crucial or one important reminder, dapat kung ilan ang respondents nyo na kinuha sa first group, yun rin ang number of respondents nyo sa second group, and then sa third group, and all of the groups. So kung 13 ang kinuha natin sa section A, 13 ang kukunin natin sa section B, 13 ang kukunin natin sa section C. So that's stratified random sampling. A bit complicated, but it can be simplified by thinking it in this way, or according to this way. Stratified random sampling, una, i-group natin sila. Next, after mag-group, pipili kayo kung random sampling or systematic random sampling ang gagawin natin. Yun lang. Next, there may be a time or there may be times in which probability sampling is not applicable. Let's say, for example, I am studying about the students or the learning habits of SMAU students, yung mga nagme-major ng SMAU. Tapos nag-random number generate ako. Ang na-generate na number ay number 3. Tapos nung tinignan ko yung list, hindi naman siya SMAU student. Hume's student siya. So that is not a possible way. So what an alternative to that is using non-probability sampling. When we say non-probability sampling, some individuals have no chance of being selected. There is an unequal chance of being selected already. An advantage of this is that it is more convenient kasi ikaw ang magde-determine kung sino ang magiging respondents mo. So wala nang random number generator, wala nang systematic ways, ikaw ang pipili or ikaw ang pipili ng respondents mo. So an advantage of that is that it is convenient, it is easier, and it will save you time. However, kasi ikaw ngayong pumili, the tendency is that it may have some form of bias. And the result may not represent the whole population. So yun ang downside niya. Kahit madali siya, there is a bigger or there's a big downside or a disadvantage. Nonetheless, there are two kinds of non-probability sampling method. The first one is your purposive sampling. In purposive sampling, you should have a purpose. We find participants that fit the description of the persons we want to investigate. And then the sampling is guided by the purpose of the study. Say, for example, I am studying the perceptions of single women in their 40s about marriage. So kung yun ang respondents ko, syempre ang pipiliin ko yung talagang women in their 40s who are single. So kung ang gagawin natin kasi random number tapos na itapat sa let's say number 4 tapos lalaki yun, it will not coincide with our study. So it's better to use a purposive sample. Kung yung purposive sampling ang gagamitin natin, so ang pipiliin ko dito, yung mga talagang respondents ng study ko. In this case, yung mga single women in their 40s. So ito yung mga pipiliin ko. Handpick mo sila. Yan. Sila ang pipiliin mong respondents. Okay. Next. The simplest one of all is the convenience sampling. Basically, we are just finding some people who are available at the moment. Say, for example, I'm trying to look into the customer satisfaction of a restaurant. Syempre, labas-masok yung mga tao sa restaurant. You cannot assign a random number per customer. So what you can do is that you have to stand outside and then just give the questionnaire or the instrument. Nangyayari yan noon sa Jollibee back before the pandemic. Pag kumakain kami, may nagbibigay ng survey questionnaire kung sino yung available at the moment, binibigay ng waiter yung survey questionnaire, tapos kung ano ang babalik na mga questionnaire, yun lang ang magiging part ng sample nila. So these are some tips on how to improve your response rates. At times kasi, ito yung problem. Medyo nahihirapan yung mga grupong mag-retrieve ng mga survey questionnaires or mga instruments. So ang pwede natin gawin are these ones. Number 1, you can personalize the invitation. We can make letters, tapos stating their name, then the purpose of the study, para maliwanagan sila. And in that way, when you personalize the invitation, you are establishing connection to your respondents. Aside from this, of course, we do not offer money, but we offer incentives. Pag may incentive kasi, mas nagaganahan yung mga estudyante or yung mga respondents natin. Take our case when we were in college. Nahihirapan kaming mag-float ng questionnaire namin. So what we did is to reward them with candies. So after rewarding them with candies, we observed or we noticed that we are collecting or nababawasan yung mga hindi namin nako-collect na mga survey questionnaire. That is one way of improving the response rates. So before we have our exercise, let's visit again our sampling methods. There are two kinds of sampling. Sampling methods is how you select your respondents of your study. There are two ways of selecting your respondents. The first one is probability sampling, in which all individuals have equal chances of being selected. Under probability sampling, you have your simple random. Mag-generate ka lang ng random number. Next, you have systematic random sampling. You have to choose at a specific interval. So may formula yan. And then the last kind of probability sampling is your stratified random sampling, which consists of two major steps. The first one is grouping them into strata and then performing either simple or systematic random sampling. The next kind of sampling method is your non-probability sampling, in which case some of the respondents do not have the chance of being selected. And a kind of research or non-probability sampling is your convenience sampling, which is based on the availability of the respondent, and purposive sampling, which is based on the purpose of the study. Okay, now that these are all done, I think we are ready with our simple exercise. So in this simple exercise, you're just going to identify the sampling method that was used. So let's start with number 1. Bea assigned random numbers to students and selects her respondents every 8 interval. So meron siyang interval. What could be the sampling method that was used? If your answer is systematic random sampling, then that is correct. Next, Julia randomly selects 30 respondents as given by a random number generator. So it's very obvious that the answer is simple random sampling. Or third situation, Gerald grouped the students by gender. And then after grouping them, he selects 10 random respondents per gender. What sampling method was used? If your answer is stratified random sampling, then that is correct. Fourth situation, Cardo floated his questionnaires to the residents of Barangay San Luis who are available and willing at that time. What could be the sampling method that was used? Of course, the sampling method is convenience sampling. Kasi nga, those who are only available and willing at that time. And last situation, Flora selected only the teachers who were vaccinated with the COVID-19 vaccines as her respondents in her research. So basically, si Flora, ang sinelect nilang respondents, yung mga COVID-19 or yung mga na-vaccinated na mga teachers. So if she has a target group, what sampling method was used? If your answer is purposive sampling, then that's brilliant. You are right. So I hope you got all of the situations correctly. Let's now visit or revisit the topics that were discussed as the last part of our discussion for today. We first learned that we need to make our methodology so that our results will not end up in a disaster, such as the picture about the rice. So one way of making your research methodology is to state your research design. When you write your research design, you have to state your overall methodological approach. Second, the specific designs that will be used in your study. Third, the reasons why you chose those designs. Number 4, the collection or the data collecting instrument and the statistical analysis that will be used. And number 5, other information that is that concerns the methodology of your study. Next, in the sampling method, we learned about the 2 kinds of selecting your representatives of the population, your probability sampling and non-probability sampling. I hope you will be able to integrate these lessons in crafting your chapter 3. By the way, you are expected now to finish your research paper before the school year ends. And when we say before the school year ends, that means by the last week or the 3rd week of June. By the 3rd week of June. So you have a good amount of time to collect now your data, to make your chapter 3, to collect your data, and to interpret your results. So I will be posting my schedule in your GC so that you can contact me based on the schedule that I proposed regarding your regarding some questions or some inquiries. I am Rodney Giverson V. Garcia. Thank you. I hope everybody gives their full participation. Leaders, please be more strict and note to those students who are not participating, you are missing out. You are missing out. Nahuhuli kayo. You are missing out so much. Take note that research encompasses everything. Lahat ng nakikita nyo may be a product of research. So when you graduate and step into college, you are expected now to come up with a research paper. And if you are not interested at this point of time, it will have serious consequences in your college life. So I hope I made myself clear. Please contact me if you have inquiries. And that's it. Goodbye and happy weekend.